There is a law in the Keth Collective. It is not written in any treaty. It is not encoded in any legal document. It is not debated in any chamber of government. It exists only in the memory of those who witnessed what happened to the Sorvaan Empire, and the Dellen Federation, and the Cruath Hegemony. The law is simple. Do not touch the humans. For 200 years, every civilization that came within reach of human space learned this law the same way. By watching someone else break it. The Keth Collective was old, ancient by any reasonable measure. They had existed for 11,000 years. They had expanded across 600 star systems. They had survived wars, plagues, extinctions of neighboring species, and the slow collapse of 3 different galactic power structures. They had survived all of it because they were careful, because they were patient, because they had learned over 11 millennia to read the patterns of the universe and move accordingly. They had misread humanity, not because the signs weren't there, because they had chosen not to believe them. One strike on a human outpost. That was all it took. 700,000 warships answered. And the Keth Collective learned the law the hard way. The Keth did not consider themselves aggressive. They considered themselves efficient. When the Keth Collective identified a resource, they acquired it. When they identified an obstacle, they removed it. When they identified a civilization that stood between them and what they wanted, they made a calculation. The calculation was always the same, cost versus benefit. The resource in question was a region of space known as the Hellion Corridor, a narrow band of systems rich in heavy elements, rare isotopes, and stable wormhole points that made transit between 2 major Keth territories 3 times faster. The Hellion Corridor also contained a human outpost. Waystation Kira-7, a small installation, 3,000 personnel. Scientists, engineers, a maintenance crew, and a garrison of 40 soldiers because regulations required a garrison even at installations this remote. Supreme Executor Davan-Hael studied the file on Waystation Kira-7 for approximately 12 minutes before reaching a conclusion. The outpost was an obstacle. The calculation was straightforward. 3,000 humans, 40 soldiers, no defensive fleet of any significance, 1 cruiser on regular patrol that would not return for 19 days. Against that, the Keth Border Security Division, which maintained 1,200 warships specifically for situations like this. The cost of removing the obstacle, minimal. The benefit of securing the Hellion Corridor, enormous. Davan-Hael reviewed the historical files on human-Keth relations. They were minimal. Humanity occupied a region of space several hundred light-years from the nearest Keth territory. Their civilizations had not interacted in any significant way. There were warnings in the file, notes from lower-ranking analysts flagging certain incidents: the Sorvaan Empire, the Dellen Federation, the Cruath Hegemony. Davan-Hael skimmed these sections. Ancient history, other species, different circumstances. The Keth Collective had 11,000 years of operational experience. They were not the Sorvaan Empire. They were not the Dellen Federation. He authorized the operation. 36 hours later, Fleet Commander Orath-Sol arrived at Waystation Kira-7 with 240 warships. She opened a channel. A human appeared on the screen. Female, young, a lieutenant's insignia on her collar, and the expression of someone who had been awoken from sleep at an unusual hour. "This is Lieutenant Yara Chen of Waystation Kira-7, the woman said. She looked at the tactical display showing 240 warships. Her expression didn't change. "Can I help you?" Fleet Commander Orath-Sol had communicated with many species at the moment of first contact under these circumstances. She had received fear, desperation, anger, negotiation attempts, and once, memorably, a threat that had made her laugh. She had never received what sounded like mild curiosity from someone who had just been woken up. "I am Fleet Commander Orath-Sol of the Keth Collective Border Security Division," she said. "I am here to inform you that the Hellion Corridor has been designated a Keth Administrative Zone. You have 24 hours to evacuate this installation and all personnel." Lieutenant Chen looked at her for a moment. "Hold on," she said, "I need to make a call." The channel muted. Orath-Sol could see the lieutenant moving to a secondary console. She appeared to be sending a transmission. The fleet commander waited. After approximately 4 minutes, the lieutenant came back. "Okay," she said, "I talked to my command." "And?" Orath-Sol asked. "They said to tell you we're not evacuating." The lieutenant's voice was very calm. "They also said to log your fleet's exact specifications, position, and the timest." "Amp of this communication, which I've done." Orath-Sol processed this. "Lieutenant, you have 40 soldiers and no significant defensive capability. I have 240 warships. I want to be certain you understand the situation." "I understand it," the lieutenant said. "Do you want to talk to my garrison commander? He's the senior military officer on station." "That won't be necessary." "Okay," the lieutenant paused. "Can I ask you something?" Orath-Sol was mildly surprised. "Go ahead." "Are you familiar with what happened to the Sorvaan Empire?" Orath-Sol had read that section of the file. She had skimmed it. "Vaguely," she said. Lieutenant Chen nodded slowly. "Okay," she said again, and then, "I'm going to give you some advice, Fleet Commander, and I want you to understand I'm giving it sincerely." "What advice?" "Leave," the lieutenant said. "Right now, take your fleet and go home. Don't file a report about this. Don't escalate it, just leave." Orath-Sol stared at her. A lieutenant, 3,000 people, 40 soldiers. "Thank you for the advice," she said. "You have 24 hours." She closed the channel. She did not leave. The 24 hours passed. Waystation Kira-7 did not evacuate. Orath-Sol was not surprised. She had expected defiance. She had planned for defiance. Her orders were clear. If the installation did not comply, she was authorized to use whatever force was necessary to remove the obstacle. She gave the order. The first salvo destroyed the station's external communications array. The second took out the docking ring. The third was stopped. Not because she ordered it stopped, but because the weapons wouldn't fire. "Report," Orath-Sol said sharply. "Targeting systems are locked, Commander." The weapons officer's voice was confused. "Something is interfering with our firing solutions. I'm reading an external signal." "What kind of signal?" "Unknown. It's coming from inside the station." A pause. "Commander, the station is broadcasting on a frequency I've never seen. It's not a communication signal. It's not a jamming signal. It's—" Well, he stopped. "What is it?" Orath-Sol demanded. "It's a key," he said. "It's unlocking our weapons systems from the inside. His voice went very quiet. "Commander, it's not blocking our weapons, it's redirecting them." On the tactical display, Orath-Sol watched in real time as her fleet's weapons solutions shifted. Every targeting lock that had been aimed at Waystation Kira-7 rotated slowly, smoothly, precisely, until every gun in her 240-ship fleet was pointing at itself. A fleet-on-fleet targeting. From the inside. A human outpost with 40 soldiers had just reached into the targeting systems of 240 warships and pointed them at each other. Orath-Sol stared at her display. How, she said. No one answered because no one knew. The communications channel opened. Lieutenant Chen appeared on the screen. She looked exactly the same as before, calm, slightly tired. Fleet Commander, she said, I want to show you something. A secondary window opened on the screen. It showed a list, a very long list. Those are the specifications of your fleet, the lieutenant said. Every ship, every weapons system, every power output, every crew manifest. She paused. We've been passively scanning your vessels since you arrived. We do that with everyone who enters this corridor. Orath-Sol was very still. I'm also going to tell you something, the lieutenant continued. The transmission I sent when you first contacted us, the call to my command, that wasn't a request for permission to refuse your evacuation order. Then what was it? It was a notification, the lieutenant said. I was telling them you were here, what you had, what you'd done. She looked directly at the camera. They asked me to keep you talking as long as possible. Cold understanding moved through Orath-Sol like ice water. Why, she asked, though she suspected she already knew. Lieutenant Chen glanced at something off-screen. Then she looked back. Because transit takes time, she said, even with our network. She paused. They're close now, you should probably see this. The secondary window shifted. It showed deep space, the dark beyond the station's sensor range. Empty to the naked eye, empty on standard sensors. But on the enhanced display something was forming, dozens of contact points, then hundreds, then. How many? Orath-Sol's tactical officer began. The contacts were still multiplying. They weren't approaching from a single direction. They were appearing from everywhere at once, above, below, on all sides. Ships coming through points in space that shouldn't have had ships in them, appearing without hyperspace signatures, without any transit indicator at all. Just not there and then's there. Orath-Sol grabbed the edge of her command console. Her weapons were still pointed at her own fleet. And she was surrounded. What Fleet Commander Orath-Sol did not know, what the Keth Collective had never bothered to learn, because they had never considered humanity a relevant power, was the full story of how human space operated. The story that every analyst had skimmed over, the history that had been filed under notable incidents, other species, and largely ignored. The story of the Sorvaan Empire. 230 years earlier, the Sorvaan had been the dominant power in their region of space. 12,000 warships, 800 colonized systems, a civilization that had been expanding for 4 centuries. They had encountered humanity at the edge of their expansion and made the same calculation the Keth had just made. Small civilization, limited visible military capability, occupying space the Sorvaan wanted. They had destroyed a human colony called Meridian Station, 40,000 people. Humanity had responded with 120,000 warships. The Sorvaan Empire no longer existed. Not defeated, not occupied, not absorbed. Gone. Every ship, every colony, every world, reduced to rubble and silence in a campaign that lasted 14 months. Then the Dellen Federation had tried, and the Cruath Hegemony, and the Yaren Conglomerate, and the Teshan Republic. All gone. Every single time the same pattern, a strike against a human installation, a pause, then a response that was so catastrophically disproportionate that the attacking civilization ceased to exist as a functioning entity. The Keth analysts had written all of this off as coincidence, as escalation, as political decisions made under specific circumstances that would not apply to the Keth Collective, which was larger, older, and more experienced than any of those failed civilizations. They had been wrong. What they had failed to understand was this. Humanity did not maintain a standing military in the way that other civilizations did. Other civilizations built warships, trained soldiers, and maintained fleets proportional to their perceived threats. They grew their military over decades in response to external pressures. Humanity had taken a different approach entirely. 70 years earlier, after the fall of the Sorvaan Empire, humanity's Strategic Defense Council had convened for 6 months and reached a conclusion. The conclusion was it would happen again. Not might happens would. Some civilization somewhere would look at human space and see an opportunity, would calculate the cost-benefit ratio, would decide the visible human military was manageable. And they would strike. The council had two choices. Build a military large enough that no one would ever dare strike. A military so vast and so visible that the calculation always came back, not worth it. Lord, build a military large enough that no one would ever dare strike again. A military invisible enough that the calculation always seemed favorable, right up until the moment it was too late. They chose the second option. Because the first option had a flaw, if you show your full strength, you invite others to build against it. You start an arms race you cannot ultimately win because you are one civilization and the galaxy contains many. The second option had one requirement. You had to be willing to let the first strike happen. You had to be willing to absorb the blow. And then you had to respond so completely, so thoroughly, so absolutely that the lesson was never forgotten. Humanity had built 740,000 warships over 70 years. Not 300, not 3,000. 740,000. They sat in hidden shipyards in uninhabited systems scattered across a vast region of space that no external civilization had ever fully mapped. They were crude and ready. They were linked by a gate network that allowed them to transit anywhere in human space and beyond in minutes. They had never been used. Waystation Kira-7 was the first strike in 70 years. Lieutenant Yara Chen had known when she took the posting what she was signing up for. Every person stationed at a border installation knew. You might be the first strike. You might be the blow that humanity chose to absorb. You sent the notification, you logged everything. You stalled as long as you could. And then you trusted that what came next would be worth it. Fleet Commander Orath-Sol watched the contacts multiply on her tactical display. She stopped counting at 40,000. The ships were still appearing. Commander, her tactical officer's voice had lost all professional composure. It was just a person reading numbers off a display, unable to fully process what they meant. I'm counting in excess of. Don't count, Orath-Sol said. Commanders. Don't count, she repeated. She could see the shape of it now. The human fleet hadn't surrounded her in a sphere. It had surrounded her in a sphere and then filled in the sphere. Ships, beyond ships, layer after layer, in every direction her sensors could. They reached 240 Keth warships. Inside a formation of, she didn't want to know how many human warships. The communications channel opened again. This time it wasn't Lieutenant Chen. The person on the screen was older, a woman with the insignia of a full admiral. Her expression was the same as the lieutenant's had been, not angry, not triumphant, not cruel. Just calm. Just waiting. Fleet Commander Orath-Sol, the admiral said. As Admiral, Orath-Sol managed. My name is Admiral Curran Osai. I command the Human Strategic Response Fleet. She paused. I want to explain something to you. Go ahead, Orath-Sol said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. In the last 73 minutes, we have deployed 712,000 warships to this location. The Admiral's voice was conversational, matter of fact. We have an additional 28,000 in reserve that we haven't needed to move. Orath-Sol said nothing. Waystation Kira-7 has a crew of 3,000 people, the Admiral continued. Your fleet has already destroyed the external communications array and the docking ring. 3 crew members were killed in those strikes. 3 people against 700,000 warships. I want to ask you a question, Admiral Osai said, and I want you to answer honestly because your answer will affect what happens next. Ask, Orath-Sol said. Did you read the historical files, the Sorvaan Empire, the Dellen Federation, the others? Orath-Sol closed her eyes briefly. I read them. Did you believe them? A long pause. No, Orath-Sol said, I didn't. Admiral Osai nodded slowly. That's the honest answer, thank you. She was quiet for a moment. Here is what's going to happen, she said. Your fleet is going to power down its weapons and its propulsion systems, every ship. Complete shutdown of offensive and transit capability. Your crew will remain aboard. You will be held in place while we contact the Keth Collective government. And if I refuse, Orath-Sol asked. The Admiral looked at her. Orath-Sol looked at the tactical display, at 712,000 ships, at the weapons that were still pointed at her own fleet from the inside. I won't refuse, she said. Good, Admiral Osai stood. One more thing, Fleet Commander. Oh yes. Your analyst files, the ones that noted the warnings, the ones that flagged the historical incidents. She paused. I want those sent to your government before your fleet powers down. Unencrypted, wideband broadcast. I want every civilization in this region to receive them simultaneously. Orath-Sol frowned. Why? Because the lesson works better when it's taught clearly, the Admiral said. We don't want to do this again. Supreme Executor Davan-Hael received the transmission from Fleet Commander Orath-Sol while he was in a council meeting. He read it once. Then he asked everyone else to leave the room. He read it again. 240 warships, surrounded, powered down, held in place by a force that numbered, he checked the figure twice, 712,000 human warships. For the destruction of a communications array, a docking ring, and the deaths of 3 crew members. He sat in the empty council chamber for a very long time. Then he pulled up the historical files, the ones his analysts had flagged, the ones he had skimmed. He read them properly this time. The Sorvaan Empire, 1 colony, 40,000 people, the human response, 120,000 ships, the Sorvaan's total military strength at the time, 60,000 ships. They had been outnumbered 2-to-1 with their entire fleet. The campaign had lasted 14 months. The Dellen Federation, an attempted annexation of 3 human border systems. Human response, 240,000 ships. The Dellen's total military strength, 90,000 ships. The campaign had lasted 8 months. The Cruath Hegemony, a blockade of a human trade route. Human response, 350,000 ships. The Cruath had sued for peace immediately. The peace terms had included the complete disbandment of the Cruath military and a 100-year supervision period. Each time more ships than the last. Each time a response so overwhelming that the attacking civilization had no option but to surrender or be destroyed. And each time humanity had not occupied the defeated civilization, had not taken their worlds, had not installed a government, had simply dismantled their military capability, extracted a settlement that included permanent concessions and left. A message, Davan-Hael realized. Every single response had been a message. Not to the civilization they were fighting. To everyone watching, this is what we have, this is what we will use. This is what happens when you touch what is ours. And the message had worked. For 70 years, not a single civilization had struck a human installation. Until the Keth Collective. Until him. He thought about the analyst reports, the warnings, the flags. He thought about how he had skimmed them. He thought about 3 crew members dead on Waystation Kira-7. He thought about 712,000 warships. He picked up his communicator. "Get me the Admiral," he said, "the human Admiral." The conversation between Supreme Executor Davan-Hael and Admiral Kurath-Sol lasted 4 hours. It was not a negotiation, exactly. Negotiations implied that both parties had things to trade. Davan-Hael had very little to trade. Humanity held his fleet. Humanity held the Hellion corridor. Humanity held every advantage. What Davan-Hael had was a civilization of 9 billion Keth spread across 600 systems, and a desperate hope that the admiral across from him was the kind of person who meant it when she said they didn't want to do this again. Oh, she was. The terms were not gentle, they were not designed to be. The Keth Collective would withdraw all claims to the Hellion corridor, permanently and irrevocably. Fleet Commander Orath-Sol and her crew would be returned. The 240 ships would be returned, operational but stripped of all weapons systems. The crews would carry with them a complete record of every ship in the human fleet they had witnessed, every specification, every capability. The record would be required reading for every military officer in the Keth Collective, every year for the next 100 years. 3 memorial funds would be established in the names of the 3 crew members killed in the strike, funded by the Keth Collective, for 100 years. And the historical files, the Sorvaan, the Dellen, the Cruath, all of them would be incorporated into Keth educational curriculum at every level. Required study for every student, from childhood through military academy. Davan-Hael agreed to all of it. At the end of the conversation, he asked one question. 712,000 ships, he said, in 73 minutes. Oh yes, the Admiral said. You've never used them before. No. Why not? You could have, he paused. You could have ended every conflict before it started. You could have simply revealed what you have, shown the galaxy, made it clear. Admiral Osai was quiet for a moment. We considered that, she said. Early on, we debated it for years. Why didn't you? Because showing a weapon invites people to build against it, she said. If we revealed 700,000 ships, others would build 800,000, and then 1,000,000, and then more, she paused. We didn't want an arms race, we wanted a lesson. Davan-Hael understood, a lesson that requires someone to be the example. Oh yes. He thought about the Sorvaan, the Dellen, the Cruath, all the others. We were always going to be the example, he said. Someone always is, she replied. We hoped it wouldn't be necessary again. For a long time it wasn't, she looked at him. Now hopefully it won't be necessary again for a long time more. He nodded slowly. I have one more question, he said. Go ahead. The Lieutenant Chen on the station, he hesitated. She knew, when we arrived, she knew what was coming, she knew what we would do. Oh yes. She stayed anyway. Oh yes. Why? He genuinely wanted to understand. She could have evacuated, she could have. She couldn't, the Admiral said, not without warning us that she'd been notified, not without giving us the chance to leave before the fleet arrived. She paused. She stayed because her job was to hold the position long enough for us to respond, and she did her job. Davan-Hael was silent for a moment. Oh, she's alive, he asked. Yes, some injuries from the strikes, she'll recover. He nodded. He would add her name to the memorial funds, he decided. Not required by the terms of the agreement, he would do it anyway. It seemed like the least he could do. The broadcast went out across every frequency 7 days later. Admiral Osai had composed it carefully. It was not long, it did not need to be. This is Admiral Curran Osai of the Human Strategic Defense Command. 7 days ago, the Keth Collective Border Security Division struck Waystation Kira-7. 3 members of our crew were killed. The installation was damaged. The Human Strategic Response Fleet deployed to the location within 73 minutes. 712,000 warships. She let that number sit for a moment. The Keth Collective has agreed to terms. Their fleet has been returned to them. The incident is resolved. Another pause. We want to speak directly to every government, every military commander, every strategic council that is listening to this transmission. We know what you see when you look at human space. You see our colonies, you see our visible fleet, you see a number of warships that seems manageable. We have never corrected that impression deliberately. We are correcting it now. 712,000 warships are deployed in 73 minutes. This is not our full capability. She let that land. We are not conquerors. We have never wanted your space, your resources, or your submission. Every civilization that exists in peace as far as we are concerned. But we want to be clear, clearer than we have perhaps been about what we are. We are patient, we are prepared, and we remember every names. A pause. 3 crew members were killed at Waystation Kira-7. Their names were Sergeant Tamaz Reyes, Technician First Class Amara Diallo, and Engineers Mate Yuki Tanaka. We remember their names. We ask that you remember this transmission. Do not strike what is ours. The response will always be the same, no matter how long it has been, no matter how far away you think you are, no matter how carefully you have calculated the odds. The response will always be 700,000 warships. Zormort. The broadcast ended. In the months that followed, 3 different civilizations that had been quietly planning expansions into regions adjacent to human space held emergency reviews of those plans. All 3 canceled. In the Keth Collective, Supreme Executor Davan-Hael mandated the curriculum changes personally. He sat in on the first class himself, a room of 12-year-olds learning about the Sorvaan Empire for the first time. He watched their faces change as they understood. Fleet Commander Orath-Sol retired 6 months after her return. She had served the Collective for 30 years. She had never lost a battle. She had never been more certain of anything in her career than she had been at that moment on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, surrounded by 700,000 human warships, with her own guns pointed at her own fleet. She had been certain that she was looking at something that had been prepared for a very long time. That was waiting for exactly this. On Waystation Kira-7, as the repairs neared completion, Lieutenant Yara Chen was offered a promotion and a transfer to a safer posting. She declined the transfer. "Someone has to be here," she said when asked why. Her commanding officer didn't push it, he understood. Someone always had to be at the border. Someone always had to send the notification. Someone always had to stay long enough for the response to arrive. 70 years of peace had been purchased in part by the willingness of people like Yara Chen to be the first contact, the first face, the first voice that said, "I've been told to tell you to leave," and to stay when the answer was no. On Earth, in a facility 7 kilometers underground, Admiral Curran Osai filed her final report on the Kira-7 incident. She noted the outcome, the terms, the broadcast. She noted in a single line at the end of the report her assessment of future risk. Probability of repeat incident within 10 years. Low. Probability of repeat incident within 50 years, moderate. The lesson is taught, not learned. It will need to be taught again. She signed the report. Then she pulled up the deployment status of the Strategic Response Fleet. 740,000 ships. Ready, waiting, invisible to every eye that wasn't looking in exactly the right place. She made one note in the margins of the deployment log. Not a strategy, not an order. Just a reminder. Remember their names. Tamaz Amara Yuki. We remember.